What if everything you were taught about money is the reason you're broke? Not lazy, not unlucky, just taught wrong. Imagine two boys, same city, same school, same intelligence. One grows up to struggle with money his whole life, always working, always tired, always one paycheck from panic. The other grows up to build wealth so big it changes his family tree forever. Here's the twist. These two boys had almost identical educations. The only real difference? The advice they got at home from two different fathers. One of those fathers was a highly educated man with a good job, multiple degrees, and a stable paycheck. The other never finished high school. Guess which one ended up broke? If you guessed the educated one, you already understand more about money than most adults. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand it a whole lot more, because we're breaking down one of the most life-changing money books ever written, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Stick around, because idea number 6 on this list is the one that quietly separates people who stay broke from people who become wealthy, and almost nobody talks about it. This book was written by Robert Kiyosaki, and it's sold over 40 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling personal finance books of all time. But here's the thing that makes it different from every other money book on the shelf. It's not really a finance textbook. It's a story. Robert grew up with two father figures. His biological dad, brilliant, well-educated, a respected government official, we'll call him Poor Dad. And his best friend's father, a businessman who never graduated high school, we'll call him Rich Dad. Both men gave Robert advice about money, and that advice was almost the exact opposite of each other. Poor Dad said, "Go to school, get good grades, find a safe, secure job." Rich Dad said, "School teaches you to work for money. I'm going to teach you how to make money work for you." Robert spent his whole childhood bouncing between these two philosophies like a kid stuck between two different religions. And what he eventually discovered didn't just make him rich, it exposed a massive blind spot in how almost all of us are raised to think about money. So let's walk through exactly what he learned, starting with the moment that changed everything. Idea 1. The rich don't work for money, they learn how money works. When Robert was 9 years old, he asked Rich Dad to teach him how to get rich. Instead of handing him cash or advice, Rich Dad gave him a job, sweeping floors in his store for 10 cents an hour. After weeks of sweeping for basically nothing, Robert got angry and stormed in to complain. And that's when Rich Dad taught him the first big lesson. Most people spend their entire lives angry at their paycheck, blaming their boss, their job, their salary, instead of asking a better question. Asterisk, what can this situation teach me? Asterisk. Here's the real-life version of this. Think about two employees at the same company, same salary. One clocks in, complains about the pay, clocks out, and repeats that for 30 years. The other uses that same job to learn how the business actually works, how money flows in, how decisions get made, what skills create value. Same paycheck, completely different future. Rich Dad's point wasn't don't get paid. His point was stop working for money and start working to learn how money works. Because a paycheck runs out the moment you stop showing up. Knowledge doesn't. This one idea is the seed for everything else in this book, because once you shift from how much do I get paid to what am I learning, your whole relationship with money starts to change. And that shift leads directly into the most famous concept in the entire book. Idea 2, assets versus liabilities. The idea that breaks most people's brains. Here's a question that sounds simple but trips up almost everyone. Is your house an asset? Most people say yes instantly. Rich Dad would say not necessarily, and that one distinction is the difference between staying broke and getting rich. Kiyosaki's definition is brutally simple. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. That's it. Not what it's called, not how nice it looks, not what a bank statement says. Just Does it feed you, or does it feed off you? Think about a guy who buys a brand new truck with a car payment, insurance, gas, and maintenance every single month. It feels like wealth, shiny, impressive. I made it. But every month, money leaves his pocket because of it. That's a liability dressed up to look like success. Now think about someone who buys a small rental property that brings in rent every month, even after covering expenses. That's an asset, quietly putting money into their pocket whether they show up to work or not. Here's why this matters so much. The poor and middle class spend their whole lives buying liabilities and calling them assets. Bigger house, newer car, more stuff, all funded by a paycheck they're terrified to lose. The wealthy do something different. They use their money to buy things that pay them, and eventually those things buy the stuff for them. This single distinction is basically the dividing line in the entire book. But it raises an obvious question. If assets are so powerful, why doesn't everyone just go buy some? That's where the next idea comes in, and it's the one most people get completely backwards. Idea 3, mind your own business. Here's a trap millions of hardworking, intelligent people fall into without realizing it. They spend 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week building someone else's dream, and 0 hours building their own. Kiyosaki calls this minding your own business. And he's not talking about starting a company. He's talking about a simple habit, taking a portion of what you earn and directing it toward things that build your personal asset column, even while you keep your day job. Picture a nurse working long shifts at a hospital. Her profession is nursing, that's how she earns income. But her business might be a few index fund investments, a small side property, or shares she buys consistently over the years. Her job pays the bills today. Her business, her assets, quietly builds the wealth that will eventually let her stop needing the job at all. Most people never build the second track. Every dollar goes toward their lifestyle, their bills, their liabilities, and none of it goes toward things that work for them while they sleep. Why does this matter so much? Because your job was never designed to make you rich. It was designed to keep the company running. Getting rich requires a separate track, one you build deliberately on the side starting small. But here's the uncomfortable question this raises. If building assets is so important, why do so many educated, hardworking people still struggle to do it? The answer isn't about intelligence. It's about something rich dad hammered into Robert over and over, something schools almost never teach. Idea 4. Financial literacy is a skill school never taught you. Robert makes a bold claim in this book. You can be highly educated, a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and still be financially illiterate. And financial illiteracy, not lack of income, is the real reason most people stay stuck. Financial literacy means understanding how money actually works, reading a basic financial statement, understanding the difference between income, expenses, assets, and liabilities, and knowing how debt and taxes actually function. Think about two people who both get a raise. One immediately upgrades their car and their apartment. Spending rises right along with income. Nothing changes long-term, no matter how many raises they get. The other understands enough about money to redirect part of that raise into something that generates more income. Same raise, two completely different financial futures, and the gap isn't intelligence. It's literacy. This is why lottery winners often end up broke within a few years, and why some people with modest salaries quietly build real wealth. It was never really about how much you make. It's about whether you understand what to do with it once it arrives. And once you understand this, a whole new question opens up. If money follows rules like this, are there rules the wealthy use that most people don't even know exist? Yes. And one of them involves the government itself. Idea 5. Taxes, corporations, and playing by a different rulebook. This is where the book gets a little controversial, but stick with it because the logic is fascinating. Kiyosaki points out that employees earn, get taxed, and then spend whatever's left. Businesses, on the other hand, earn, spend on legitimate expenses first, and get taxed on what remains. Picture two people who each want a home office setup, a laptop, a desk, some equipment. An employee buys it with money that's already been taxed out of their paycheck. A business owner, structured properly and legally, can often buy the same equipment as a business expense before taxes are calculated. Same purchase, different order, different result. This is why Rich Dad pushed Robert to understand corporations and legal business structures early, not to avoid responsibility, but to understand that the tax code isn't one size fits all. It rewards certain financial behaviors, investing, building businesses, creating jobs, more than others. This idea alone won't make anyone rich overnight. But it reveals something important. The wealthy aren't just luckier. Many of them are playing a version of the game with different rules. Rules that are legally available to anyone willing to learn them. Which leads to the idea we teased at the very beginning of this video, the one that quietly decides who stays broke and who doesn't. Idea 6. The real enemy isn't the economy. It's fear and doubt. Here's the moment in the book that hits hardest. Kiyosaki argues that the biggest obstacle to building wealth isn't lack of money, lack of opportunity, or even lack of knowledge. It's emotion, specifically fear of losing money, and self-doubt about being the type of person who could ever be wealthy. Think about someone who saves up money to invest for the first time. The night before they pull the trigger, fear shows up. What if I lose it all? What if I look stupid? What if I'm just not cut out for this? So they don't invest. They keep the money in a savings account earning almost nothing, safe but stagnant, for years. Rich Dad's response to this fear wasn't, "Don't be afraid." It was, "Use the fear as information, not as a stop sign." Every successful investor has felt that same fear. The difference is they didn't let the fear make the final decision. This is why two people can read the exact same finance book, learn the exact same strategies, and end up in completely different places 5 years later. It was never just about the information. It was about whether fear or curiosity was in the driver's seat. And that single mental shift, treating fear as a signal to learn more, not a reason to freeze, is the quiet difference between people who stay stuck and people who eventually break through. So now that we've seen the mindset, the tools, and the traps, what do you actually do with all of this? Let's lock in the biggest lessons from this book. 1. Stop working only for money, work to learn. Every job, even a bad one, can teach you something valuable if you're paying attention. 2. Know the real difference between assets and liabilities. If it doesn't put money in your pocket, be honest about what it actually is. 3. Mind your own business. Your job pays your bills. A separate, deliberate habit of building assets is what builds your wealth. 4. Financial literacy matters more than income. A high salary without financial knowledge disappears fast. A modest salary with financial knowledge compounds. 5. Understand that the financial rulebook isn't identical for everyone, and much of it is legally available to those willing to learn it. 6. Fear and self-doubt, not the economy, are usually the biggest things standing between you and your first real financial decision. None of these ideas require a huge salary to start. They require a shift in how you think, which is exactly the shift Robert Kiyosaki went through as a kid, standing between two fathers with two totally different views of money. Here's the thing that makes this story so powerful. Robert Kiyosaki wasn't born into wealth. He wasn't handed a fortune. He was handed two conflicting philosophies, and he had to choose which one to actually believe. That's the same choice every single person watching this video has right now. You've likely absorbed a poor dad mindset without even realizing it. Not because anyone failed you, but because it's what most of us were taught by default. The good news? Mindsets can be rebuilt. And the fact that you watched this whole video tells me you're already leaning toward asking better questions about your money, which, according to this book, is exactly where wealth starts. If this breakdown gave you a new way to look at money, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more books broken down like this, in plain, simple language with zero fluff. And drop a comment below telling me, what book should I break down next? Because the next story might just change the way you think about money all over again.